EdTech Modays Africa is supported by the MasterCard Foundation Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning and is part of the Foundation's Young Africa Works programming.
Hello and welcome to this edition of EdTech Modays Africa. My name is Joy Doreen Bira, and on this edition we are talking about monitoring and evaluation of blended learning models in Africa. At its simplest, blended learning requires a thoughtful integration of classroom face-to-face learning experiences with online learning experiences. At the same time, there is considerable complexity in its implementation, with the challenge of limitless design possibilities and applicability to so many contexts. As countries embark on a series of ambitious projects to leverage technology in education, there is need to understand not only the implementation process, but also what, when, and how success is measured. Effectively evaluating blended learning programs in a country is crucial and a crucial part of the learning process. Building evaluation capacity in any country requires top-level commitment at the political and organizational level. How then do you know if blended learning is working? How do we measure, and who owns the process? Is Africa's education landscape equipped for 21st century learning? Those are some of the questions that we are seeking answers to. And to kick us off, allow me to introduce our panelists for the day. Dr. Zelalem Assefa, CEO, ICT and Digital Education, Ministry of Education in Ethiopia. We also have Shem Bodo, Senior Programs Officer, Association for the Development of Education in Africa, ADER, and he is based out of Ivory Coast, also known as Côte d'Ivoire. We have Professor Charles Ongondo, CEO and Director of the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development, also known as KICD here in Kenya. A little later, we'll be hearing from Bella Rigamba, the Chief Digital Officer, Ministry of Education in Rwanda. Gentlemen, it's great to have you on this edition. Let me begin with the first question on assessing the implementation of technology-integrated learning in your country. Dr. Zelalem, I'll start with you.
Thank you so much for hosting. Actually, technology-integrated learning, you see, it's still on the early stage of implementation when it comes to our context, Ethiopia context, but it's growing rapidly. So the government has made a significant investment on ICT, especially expanding the ICT infrastructure, having the service provider to expand the fiber infrastructure all over the country. So we had made a significant implementation of ICT all over the country. So this has helped us to improve the implementation of technology in the education sector, specifically on the higher education sector, but we are still working on the general K-12 education sector. So there are some challenges that need to be addressed still from the Ethiopian context. For instance, the school in rural area do not have reliable access of electricity, access to technology. So adoption of technology in the education sector overall, we are progressing very well on the higher education sector, especially public higher education. I'm referring to which we have more than 50 public universities in Ethiopia. But when it comes to the schools, we are still on infant stage. We have to do a lot when it comes to adopting technology for schools.
Shem, what do you think?
Our experience as ADEA, based on the engagements that we have had with the countries, especially African countries, before COVID, because this is an area we have worked on before COVID and also during COVID, and the studies that we have undertaken and the engagements that we have had with policymakers show that there's there's success, but there's also a lot of work to be done. I think the successes came because there was a need, an immediate need that needed to be addressed, especially during the COVID-19. So to some extent, there were policies and practices that were, developed and others were changed so as to try and get as many learners as possible, for example, to access learning through digital platforms, through even radio, television, etc. The success of that, is yet to be comprehensively evaluated. just on the surface, it shows that yes, there were learners that actually managed to access learning. There was continuous learning in some areas and in some levels of education, but there were definitely challenges, especially with learners that are in either vulnerable situations, in hard to reach areas, learners with families that have low socioeconomic status, for example. So on the one hand, there was some success in terms of access, but on the other hand, a lot of learners were still out of the loop. And so there's still quite a lot to be done. The overall picture to us is that the preparedness for resilience remains a dream at the moment, in as far as the use of technology is concerned.
Prof, let me come to you. What do you make of our blended learning models?
I would say that in Kenya, we are at about 40% in terms of integration of technology or in our teaching and learning within basic education. 40% because pre-COVID, I think we had not quite appreciated as a country, as a continent, the essence of blending technology into our learning. But come COVID, and after realization that schools were not going to open very soon, the country committed to enhancement of 3 key requirements to implement blended learning. The first one was infrastructure. The country very, very quickly made sure that there was enhancement in internet connectivity. The country made sure that there was quick development of content that could be given to learners. And then the last one was training of personnel, the human resource, that would be able to have this content digitized, and then that would have the ability to be able to blend it within our learning system. Post-COVID, these 3 key elements have continued, and we are at 40% because the work is in progress. But our aim as a country is to have blending learning with technology come to 100% within the next 2 or 3 years.
And so, when we talk about access, and we also talk about the fact that there are challenges of connectivity, all of these issues point towards data or evidence of data. And I wanted us to speak to the importance of data evidence in monitoring and also evaluating of what exactly is working and what can work better. Dr. Zelalem, if you might take this one.
When it comes to data, we call it EMIS, Education Management Information System. We started on the EMIS, Higher Education Management Information System, which provide an access to all higher education at the ministry level so that we can get all the data from the universities right now. The previous problem, it was very difficult to get reliable data and timely data. If you are not getting reliable data and timely data, it's very difficult to make a decision based on that. So the main challenge as a sector, even right now for general K-12 education, so still we are not getting quality data and timely data. If you are not getting timely data, by the way, the data will be history. You cannot make immediate action based on recent data. So when it comes to data, it plays definitely a very crucial role in monitoring and evaluating the education initiative across the country. We have a lot of KPI, key performance indicator, that we want to achieve. So we can only monitor if you have investing on data. So the importance of data, for instance, one example you see, last year, I remember when we are receiving data from the higher education, the number of students per teacher ratio, we are trying to match the number of student to teachers ratio. So we take immediately an action on which department we are going to take an intervention to invest in some of the department. For instance, sending them to India to pursue their PhD, sending them some of the department to pursue their higher education sector by the government investment. So getting reliable data for decision making for higher level officials. Plus for researchers, the researchers should have to get also data for research and some policy advice.
Shem, this is your specialty. How important is data evidence in monitoring and evaluating? And do you think that African ministries of education or ICT take seriously data evidence when it comes to decision making?
Data is so critical. You can't fly blind, as we say. And if you cannot measure something, you cannot track it. And just from that point of view, you have to have a basis of making a decision. You have a basis of making a policy decision, for example. And so in this landscape of ICT and its use in education, it even becomes more critical. Why? Because of the different targets that are moving, in this space. So you need to have that data. It's almost like a health system. In the health system, if you don't have data, the effect can be catastrophic because lives are involved. Education system is almost just that. It's just that this life it takes a bit of time to see it ahead. So we need data definitely to track the use of ICT in education, to provide that evidence to decision makers so that they can make informed decisions. This is really, really important. And that's why one of the findings of the Global Education Monitoring Report is saying that the evidence is not rigorous enough in many countries on the impact of ICT in quality education when you look at learning outcomes. But we know in Africa, and especially sub-Saharan Africa, that even before we get to quality, the issue of access, the issue of relevance is so critical still to us because we still have many people out of the system. So for us, I think in Africa, we need to have put in place robust data measurement and monitoring systems that are able to gather data that can then inform those decisions with regards to access, with regards to the relevance, and then, of course, quality will come in. Our experience working with the African Union, for example, since 2006, have shown us that there are many, many areas, including the use of technology, where there are data gaps in African countries. There has been progress, though. There has been progress that has been made, but a lot more needs to be done simply because of the changing nature of technology. And this is one area where partners and countries need to come together, because without that robust evidence, there'll be a lot of speculation. There'll be a lot of individual perspectives, but we need some kind of hard evidence. And also this hard evidence is interesting for Africa because it may not necessarily be about numbers. It may even just be around, the issue, for example, the fear of technology by teachers, which came some time back. How do you measure that? So there's also this thing of we need to look at some of the most significant stories that, we need to engage with the users so that even their perspectives, those qualitative aspects can also come in. So it is not just the numbers, the hard numbers, but also engaging to get that feel, from the users of technology, the teachers, the learners themselves, and of course the administrators. But for sure, we need to put in robust systems for data collection, management, reporting, and also using, because sometimes we have the data, but we don't really use it. And so we need to see, how are we packaging this data? How are we presenting it? Are we presenting it as a technical document or report? Or is there a way that we can go beyond just, the numbers and look at what the numbers are telling us so that we can really provide recommendations accordingly to decision makers? So to answer your question, there has been some progress, but I think we need to do a bit more on that.
Prof, if you might, and probably without really skipping your thoughts on data evidence, I also wanted for us to speak towards, some of the steps we need to take, because when you talk about data evidence, we also need to think about the kind of investments we need to make in education that are relevant to our growing populations. What are some of those decisions that you are making or that you've made that are making education better for our younger population?
We are in the process of curriculum reform, which basically means that we are transiting from what we used to call a knowledge-based curriculum to a competency-based curriculum. One of the key pillars of this reform is leveraging on digitization. Of course, acknowledging that we are in the 21st century, where arguably we are in the thick of the fourth industrial revolution, which is driven by technology. Three other things are critical in the background. One, Kenya practices the policy of compulsory basic education. So all children should be in school and should transit to secondary. And the third one is that the country is committed to providing resources to all learners in text form, in digital form, in electronic form. My institute is charged with the responsibility of providing these resources, especially in the context of our speech here, the digital resources, but also with the responsibility of monitoring and evaluating the availability, the access by the students, how they affect the quality of learning. And the new curriculum that we are offering is at grade 7. It is supposed to go up to grade 12. And what has happened is that for every grade for grade 1, every year we monitor and evaluate the implementation of the new curriculum. And one of the things we are concerned with is the intake or the uptake of blended learning or the use of technology in learning. And that's why actually when I was telling you about 40%, it is based on our most recent monitoring and evaluation. Well, it is based on a sample, but this sample is taken from all over the country. Although you might want to just know that in my institution, we run what is called a Kenya Education Cloud. So we are able to offer lessons on television, on radio, and digitization. And so we are able to monitor how many people are coming into that platform, besides the physical travels to different corners of the country. So now that brings me to your next question, therefore, of what we need to take. And I want to join my colleague, Zelalem, by saying that I think because of the need to provide access, the need to keep retention, the need to ensure transition, for a while, our African countries have not really been thinking about data and how we can make that an aspect of even that access, that transition, and even that retention that we are talking about. But I'm happy that like in Ethiopia, even in Kenya now, one of the things that is happening and which I will recommend should happen more is that there's a deliberate effort to make sure that we have data, one, on all our learners, two, on all the resources, the current resources in the schools, and the resource needs in those places. I think, and we are doing it also like in Ethiopia, through what we call the NEMIS. The NEMIS is a National Education Management Information System. And that is supposed to give us some very integrated information on every learner, on every household. But the other thing we need to invest in, which we are doing, virtualizing our resources. For example, can we provide for virtual laboratories? One of the things Africa has been grappling with is how we can enhance the uptake of science, the teaching of science in our schools. Because like in Kenya, we have a Vision 2030, where we are saying that we should have enhanced the enrollment in high school into our science and technology to 60%. But you see, it's very, very expensive to provide physical science equipment in every school. And so if we can have virtual laboratories, and of course, therefore, every learning area, whether it is agriculture or science or computer studies or music or visual arts, has a possibility of being enhanced through virtual resources.
Okay, I agree with Prof. Also, you see, implementing EdTech specific policy, it requires really the government commitment. And of course, it will require investment for EdTech and create an enabling environment for EdTech innovation. So fortunately, currently, before 2 weeks back, we had a big validation workshop in the presence of our development partner, including World Bank, MasterCard Foundation, UNICEF, all the stakeholders, the private sector, the EdTech sector. So we recently had launched a number of EdTech related policies. One of it, the ICT in education policy for Ethiopia. We have already launched that one. And the e-learning policy specifically for higher education. The ICT in education policies for the whole education sector. The e-learning policy is to improve e-learning outcomes in the education, specifically in the higher education sectors. So this policy, you see, it will provide really a framework for implementation of EdTech in Ethiopia, specifically on the education sector. We have also a support from various government stakeholders, the policymaker, including the Minister of Innovation and Technology, previously the Minister of ICT. So we have also a big collaboration with telecom companies for this to happen. The government is also committed when we are approving the EdTech, the ICT in education policy. The government is committed to invest on the EdTech. However, you see, there has to be more need to be done to implement these policies and, of course, to create an enabling environment for this EdTech innovation. We didn't involve somehow the private sectors. Now, with the policy, we are working hard to participate the private sector, what you call it, the EdTech initiative from various parts of the country. So people are coming recently to work with the Minister of Education, especially the private sectors. We have to support also regulatory environment. After we have the policy, by the way, there has to be a guidelines, there has to be a directives, there has to be an implementation plan. So there are so many things that we are working recently to secure that policy to be implemented on the sector. So our main goal for that sector, you see, the central government, I mean the federal government from Education Ministry. We have also regional education bureau. They have also been involved. So they will also mainstream their investment on ICT, on EdTech. Also the private sector, there will be more active on investing on EdTech. So having those enabling policies environment will have a big impact to adopt the EdTech on the education sectors. Thank you.
So the year 2024 is being declared as the Year of Education by the African Union. And we want to know, in closing, as we bring this conversation to a close, what should and can be done to make sure that we bring up our education to 21st century global kind of education? Because I guess that's what we're all aiming towards with the integration of technology and also blended learning models. But then what do you think we need to focus on as we get into the Year of Education?
I think that is an important declaration. I would want to break it very, very quickly down into three main issues. One of the issues we are struggling with in Africa so that we make education accessible is that we should not leave any child behind. You may be aware that in many countries in Africa, we still have some children out of school. And so we must find a way of mopping up. In Kenya, even after declaring education compulsory and free, we're still looking for about 10% of our children, even through a multi-agency program. But the second thing we must do is that we will continue in Africa to lack adequate resources. One of the solutions, in my view, to the lack of resources is digitization. And I'll give you an example that in Kenya, For example, we are dealing with 23,000 primary schools alone. And if you take one grade, like grade 6, then we are talking about 1.2 million children. The demand for teachers for those children is too much. But through digitization, you can have one teacher, like I'm talking to you now, being able to teach even up to 10 or more classrooms across the country, so that we don't have to think beyond the 20, going forward into struggling to have a teacher in every subject, especially as you go to high school, where teachers will have tended to specialize in particular subjects. So you may find, for example, that teachers of computer studies, teachers of agriculture, teachers of business studies are not available in equal measure across the country. We can rely on a few of them to be able to provide these resources. And finally, in terms of educational infrastructure, during the years of talk and chalk are gone, learners are struggling with a lot of competing devices. We just have to think about leveraging on technology to offer our learners learning through television, through the mobile phone, through the tablets that they will get access to, through screens in their schools, and any other platforms that will give them an opportunity. And that, if you allow me a final word, will also really call for rethinking about our content. Even if we were teaching such a dry subject like history, let's call it the history of Africa, how do we make it really, really interactive so that the learner sees themselves as participating in co-constructing meaning out of this lesson?
I think it is a great opportunity. In fact, this is really an opportunity for Africa, for us to really look at our education system. Yes, we are already involved in the year of education preparation process, because what we are saying is that we should not wait until 2024 to then start working on this. We need to prepare early now, especially 2023, as we head into 2024, get the right focus. What is it that we need to focus on? Because sometimes also the tendency is to have so many things on the table, and then in the process, it's almost like a touch and go without going deeper. The conversations we are having with the African Union is that as partners, as stakeholders, we would like to zero in on a few things. For example, foundational learning. Zero in on a few things. For example, using technology to enhance not only foundational learning in terms of access, but also in terms of quality. And then go deeper so that we can say, what is it we need to do in this 1.5 years that in 2025 we can say that there's some early tangible results that we can see. It's a great opportunity to move from the comfort zone and to really bite the bullet to say, look, there are certain things that are not working well. Why don't we just take one and completely re-engineer it? Even the simple thing of because we are saying we should not leave anybody behind. I mean, that alone, if we just focus on that and say, how can we try our best to increase that? If we are at 40%, can we increase that to 70%? The year of education is a great opportunity because there's a lot of goodwill from the partners based on the meetings that we have been having. The African Union has seized this particular initiative. It's being driven really at very high level, the Commissioner of Education himself. And so our role now is to support the African Union, to guide them in coming up with a few tangible areas that we can really reorganize and reform so that we can see some change at the end of the line.
And so if I'm giving you the last word on some of those recommendations, I want to give you an opportunity to say them here first so that we can get into the future knowing exactly what those recommendations would be.
We cannot ignore the foundation. I think we must focus on foundational literacy, numeracy, and now the social and emotional learning. COVID has taught us that this is an area, the learner well-being is an area we cannot ignore. The teacher well-being is an area we cannot ignore. So we need to set that foundation. We need to see how we can introduce technology to help learners to learn, to help teachers to develop those pedagogical skills that they can use so that they can really impart, learners with the right knowledge, the right skills. Foundational learning is one of them that I think we cannot ignore. A house that, as you know, is not built on a good foundation will not stand. So that is one. The other area which relates to what you talked about, Joy, about the youth bulge. The issue of having youth, the many youth for the next 26 plus years, because Africa will be young for the next 26 and over years, but without skills, the necessary skills, especially 21st century skills. This is an area which we also have to focus on. And it is good to know that the area of technical and vocational education and training, TVET, is one area that the African Union considers very seriously for the continent. So that is another area. I think a second area we cannot ignore is to relook at secondary education, because it is really a pathway, for the youth to either get into the labor market or choose the right careers. So secondary education, we need to relook at it. How can we introduce vocational subjects in secondary education at least lower secondary education, so that the learners already need to appreciate that there are these different career pathways that you can actually undertake beyond the academic line, because many of our youth are finding themselves in the labor market with very low skills. So that is another area. The third one is to relook at the higher education area is in terms of research. To what extent can we make our research really respond to the societal needs? Because that is one area which we are finding is not really, we are not getting there yet. So we need to relook at the whole area of research. How can we also then harmonize our certification system so that there's mobility across the continent of skills? Because we really need to have, that skills mobility enhanced. And finally, the area of resilience. We talked about data. We've talked about EdTech. We've talked about inclusion. We see this as part of strengthening the resilience of our education system. So can we find a way of also improving those areas so that if we, at least in terms of the entire education spectrum, if the foundation is strong, if the skills are enhanced at the tertiary level, if research then helps to inform those decisions, then at least we'll be moving, and hopefully we can get many of our learners, learning, because that is really the major issue. So for me, those are the areas that I would really touch on. And of course, the last one is climate change. We cannot ignore that.
Yeah.
How education play a critical role, the green economy, the blue economy, especially for countries with legs like Kenya and all. How can we enhance the green economy, the blue economy? How can education play a role? And more importantly, how can technology play a role in that area?
Actually, before declaring this 2024 as the year of educations, if you were aware of, they had released the digital education strategy and implementation plan. So that document was released as in a continent level, and we adopt that strategy, the digital education and strategy implementation plan for Ethiopia, and we have developed our 5 years plan based on the Africa Union document. So you see, the Africa Union as a continental organization, they have aggressively working on the digital educations. That really supports us because it will provide a message for our political leaders. So in my belief, to achieve the 21st century learning especially in our context in Ethiopia, it's very crucial to support the education system by using technology to enhance the quality of educations and we get the teaching learning. We have to support the teaching learning using technology, as you said, using blended learning. We have to support the research outcomes also using technology. The research should have to be supported in higher education using technology. For instance, we have to improve the digital literacy among the teachers and the students. We have an aggressive plan, by the way, this year. We have, as a Minister of Education, very aggressive plan to provide digital literacy training. So we have to be aggressive on digital literacy for both students and teachers. The other is providing continuous professional development for education using technology. We have to, if you make it traditional way, just bringing in-house training for 2 months for teachers will not be efficient. So if you support the continuous professional development teacher using technology, that will really enhance the capacity of the teachers and ensuring the equitable access to educational resources. Thank you so much.
Great. You spoke about, digital literacy for not just the learners, but also for the teachers. In fact, Rwanda has come up, or Rwanda made a decision that for every teacher to be employed anywhere in a classroom, they have to be digitally literate. Is this something Ethiopia or Kenya are considering?
Yes. In our context, for instance, we have a competency framework. Basic, intermediate, advanced. So every graduate student should have to achieve at least minimum intermediate level of digital competency. For all the teachers, even to continue on the education system, they have to be certified on the digital literacy.
Would you say that these are some of the decisions that we need other African countries to make based on the different levels at which we're at?
I would say yes, because we must make certain hard decisions. And where evidence points us that if we don't do this based on evidence, then we are not going to move. Then we have to make those bold policy decisions, like the one that has been made by Rwanda. In fact, I think it's one of the African examples that have been highlighted in the global report. Those decisions that teachers must have this level of digital competency. We need to make those bold decisions, even in other areas. For example, when we talk about investments, to what extent are we giving a large proportion of investments targeting the marginalized, the hard to reach, the women and the girls, deliberate investment focusing in those areas? Those are some of the bold decisions that we really need in other African countries. And perhaps countries such as Rwanda can champion this,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we need some countries to champion this. We need some of those leaders at the highest level, political level. You see, that is a head of state really taking it on board. And I know other countries where now they've really taken it on board at that level. So we need such bold decisions. Rwanda has done it with the teaching. We need to see other areas, for example, that we can cover with the infrastructure, for example. This issue of corporate social responsibility, can we look at it again? Is there a way we can do it better?
So the team here at EdTech Mondays spoke to Bella Rigamba, who is the Chief Digital Officer at the Ministry of Education in Rwanda, on the decision that Rwanda took, I think a few years ago, that every teacher has to be digitally literate. Let's hear from her on what that has meant for Rwanda and how that has improved the learning and teaching outcomes in the country.
I'm Bella Rigamba. I'm the Chief Digital Officer at the Ministry of Education. What we believe is that if we want to really integrate technology into teaching and learning, the first entrance is actually with the educators, with the teachers. So we cannot just have it in the curriculum and ask the teachers to teach it and to embed it, but they also need to be confident enough for them to be able to use it. So that's the reason why we decided to start with the teachers themselves, trying to train them as much as we can so that they get to a level where they are confident with digital skills. They are at a certain level that will enable them then to fully integrate technology into their normal teaching cycles. So you have in-service teachers where we give them training while they are already teachers, they are already in schools, but we also look into train them before they become teachers, so pre-service teachers. And in terms of access to education, in Rwanda we've been able to have a universal access. So we don't have the issue of not having children that have access to education. Of course, there are some areas where children will walk a longer distance, but there are schools that are all over, and the children are actually able to access education. Now, what we've been fighting for now is not really access to education, but how do we keep the children in school? Now, when we talk about technology, it's different because we still have schools that do not have electricity, for example. It's a bit less than 20%. And in those areas, of course, to put in technology becomes a big challenge. But it's something that we've been working not only as a Ministry of Education, but also with other stakeholders, especially in the energy area, to see how can we get those schools connected to the grid. And in case this can be connected to the grid, we also look into solar systems. For EdTech policies, I think the first thing is to actually build them with all the stakeholders. When we put on a policy, usually that's what we do. We put together all the stakeholders to get different views. Because when you do that, everyone feels involved, and then implementation becomes easier because they were part of the development of the policy. For really Africa to attain the goal, we need to have the capacity to adapt our curriculum quite fast because things change pretty fast. And the way usually curriculum are set is something that takes long to be modified. So right now we should think of having curriculum that are really adaptive so that it really fits with the needs of the century we were in. There's also, of course, again, teacher training. When we adapt the curriculum, that means we also need to have the teachers onboarded with it. So not just put a curriculum there and then ask them to just follow. They also need to be part of it. We also need to be able to train them on what is the changes. So then the other part may be third point after curriculum adaptation, teacher training. It's really embedding technology because this is really the area or the century we are in. Without technology, nothing much can be done. So students then from younger age really need to be, I'll say, put into the environment that will help them strive when they get older. So they need to have technology, access to technology when they are still in school. And because you have an adapted curriculum, then you're able to embed new ideas or innovation that come in, and then make sure that this is also part of what is being taught to the students, so that when they go out on the job market, they are not looking at a different world.
Thank you very much, Bella, for that. And hearing from Rwanda, you can almost tell that if we use that as a benchmark, we'll probably be achieving our education goals very soon. And so I want to say a big thank you to all of us for taking part in this edition of EdTech Mondays Africa. We certainly have a long way to go. When we started these conversations this year, we started by asking what it would take to mainstream hybrid models of learning. We then crossed over into improving foundational literacy and numeracy. And now we are closing off the year by also evaluating and monitoring the blended learning models we have across Africa. My name is Joy Doreen Bira. Thank you all so much for watching. Until the next one, bye-bye for now.
EdTech Mondays Africa is supported by the Mastercard Foundation Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning and is part of the Foundation's Young Africa Works programming.